Okay, Chair, when you're ready, you can start the meeting.
Thank you, Wendy. Good morning and welcome to Sidmouth and East Beach BMP Steering Group virtual meeting on the 25th of February 2021. I'm your chair, Councillor Jeff Young. I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. As this meeting is being live streamed, I would ask all participants to please bear this in mind throughout. And may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members of the District Council joining us that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. I also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any telephone devices off or to silent. As this meeting is dependent on internet connection, in the event of a break in the connection or power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and do not interrupt. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. We will now start the meeting by running through introductions of these advisory group members present. When you hear your name called, please confirm your name and who you are representing. Thank you. Back to Debbie.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, so advisory group members, when I call your name, if you could just unmute yourself, confirm that you're present, and to confirm who you're representing here today. Thank you. I'm going to run through faces as I see them, so the order might seem a little strange, so bear with me. Can I start with the first face I see, and that's Richard Ely, please.
Hello, everybody. I'm Richard Ely, and I'm representing Sidmouth Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you. And Councillor John Loudon.
Hello, my ward is Sidmouth Rural, and that includes Cliff Road. So I have a very keen interest in this.
Thank you. Mary Walden-Till, please.
Sorry, I tried to use Alt-A and it was flickering. I'm here on behalf of the VGA.
Thank you, Mary. And Tony Birch, please.
You're on mute, Tony. That's it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tony Birch. I'm here by invitation of the chairman, primarily because I was the project manager, technical project manager for the early part of this scheme, for those who don't know.
Thank you, Tony. On to Tom Buxton-Smith, please.
Sorry, delay on muting. I'm Tom Buxton-Smith. I'm the engineering projects manager for East Devon District Council.
Thank you. Paul Grew, please.
Morning, I'm Paul Grew. I'm the leader of the Cliff Road Action Group.
Thank you, Paul. Chris Lockyer, please.
Good morning, Chris Lockyer, representing Sidmouth Town Council.
Thank you. Andrew Hancock, please.
Good morning, I'm Andrew Hancock. I'm the service lead for street scene at East Devon District Council.
Thank you. John Radford, please.
You're on mute, John.
So I am. I'm John Radford, also representing Crag.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Sarah Hook, please, next.
Hi, I'm Sarah Hook. I'm representing the Sidmouth Hoteliers.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Ed Harrison next, please.
Hello, I'm Ed Harrison from the Sid Vale Association.
Thank you, Ed. Good morning. John Golding, please.
Morning, I'm John Golding. I'm the strategic lead for Housing, Health and Environment at East Devon District Council.
Thank you, John. Councillor Denise Bickley, please.
Morning, I'm Councillor Bickley and I represent Sidmouth Town Council and East Devon District Council, and the beach is in both my wards. Thanks.
Thank you. Ian Barlow, please. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Ian Barlow and I am representing Sidmouth Town Council.
Thank you. Darren Roberts, please.
I'm Darren Roberts, representing Planning at East Devon District Council.
Thank you, Darren. And Thomas Aldridge, please.
Hi, Tom Aldridge, Devon County Flood Risk Team.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Councillor Stuart Hughes, please.
Thank you. Stuart Hughes, Devon County Council with Sidmouth and the Sid Valley, and also an East Devon member and Town Council member.
Thank you very much. Martin Davies, please.
Yeah, morning. Martin Davis, representing the Environment Agency.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eleanor Rylance, please.
Thank you. I'm Eleanor Rylance. I'm District Councillor for Broadcliff Ward, but I'm also Assistant Portfolio Holder for Coast Country and Environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marianne Rickson, please.
Good morning. I'm Marianne Rickson. I represent Sidmouth Sid Ford and my portfolio is climate action.
Thank you. Pete Blythe, please.
Hi, I'm the Beach Officer for East Devon District Council.
Thank you. Good morning, Pete. Okay, so that's the members of the advisory group that we are expecting, Chair. So if you'd like to proceed from this point onwards with the script, that'd be great. Thank you.
Right, item 2, public speaking. Is there anyone wish to make a public representation?
No, Chair, we have not received any registrations for public speaking for this meeting. Thank you.
And apologies.
So I have apologies, Chair, from Sam Scriven, who represents the Jurassic Coast, Chris Woodruff, who represents the AONB, and just come in from Nick Jennings, who I believe is from the County Council. Thank you, Chair, that's it.
And I had a note from Jeremy Woodward that he wouldn't be able to attend. So if you can add that.
Yeah, I will do, Chair, thank you.
So we go on to item 4, notes from the previous meeting and release of past minutes. If anyone wishes to raise an issue with the minutes from the previous meeting, can you please raise your electronic hand now? I will also invite Tony Birch to speak on pages 9 and 10 of the agenda. Thank you. So have we got any raised hands?
How do I raise my hand?
So I now invite Tony Birch to speak on pages 9 and 10. He sent that out a few days ago. So if you can just explain.
I tried to raise my hand on the minutes, Chairman. Item 3, which leads on to pages 9 and 10. So where do you raise your hand on these things?
If you go down the bottom, you see participants with 2 little men.
Yeah.
Press on that.
Right.
And then you get on your right-hand side.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah,
okay.
And then at the bottom of that, you've got the right hand.
Yeah, got you. Okay, thanks. Okay, so just on that item then, I'm raising my hand for item 3 on the minutes. I'm afraid then they're not accurate because and that's the reason I wrote pages 9 and 10 to correct them. So that minute is not accurate from what I said at the original meeting. It's conflated coast protection, sea defence, and and unfortunately been clarified as it would miss down the line, and between coast defence and coast
So
protection
Tony,
is
if
extremely
you turn your
important,
camera
in this
off,
project.
you might your speaking is breaking up. If you turn your camera off, we might be able to hear you better when you speak, because it's breaking up when you're speaking.
How do I turn my camera off?
At the bottom left, you've got a camera and a microphone. Just click on the camera where it says stop video. Where's he gone? Oh, no, you're on mute now.
Right. All these new
Try again.
Right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. All right. Full screen. Right. Okay, Chair. I tried to raise my hand on the minutes of the last meeting, in particular item 3, project names and objectives, because as written, it's not correct. It's conflated flood defence, coastal protection, flood defence, and sea defence. And it's extremely important that the distinction between those is clear for everybody, because they, after all, describe the aims of this project and it's what it's all about. And so I don't know if you want me to correct the wording in that now, or just refer to item pages 9 and 10, which do explain it more clearly.
Yeah, you're proposing on page 10, item 3, proposal for updating aim 1, yeah. And then you've got the aim 1.
Yeah, the reason 3 in the minutes is incorrect, because it refers to, it says it has a wider remit for coast protection. In fact, that's its original remit, is coast protection, and the wider remit is flood defence. So it's got it all back to front, which is extremely important when it comes to looking at how this project works and the rest of it. So I could give you a note to correct those minutes. This is item 3 of the minutes. Question raised, the first bullet point, and the second bullet point. I've got corrections to make if you'd like me to make them now, or I can make them later.
Debbie, can we make this as a recommendation from matters arising from the minutes?
Yes, of course, Chair. So all I would say is with that additional paperwork that's supplied on page 9 and 10, the advisory board are happy to accept that, and that becomes part of the published minutes of the last meeting to clarify. And I'll obviously amend the minutes to make reference to supplied material. Would that help, Chair?
Yeah, that's fine. Do we need to take a vote, or?
I'm happy with whatever you decide.
And unless there are any members of the advisory group that disagree, would like to raise their electronic hand just to comment.
Yes, I've got Ian Barlow raised his hand. Yes, Ian.
Chair, I'm not an expert, and I bow to Tony Birch's expertise in this matter. However, what I read there, and as I said, I'm not an expert, but where it says that we are going to modify the existing protection scheme to provide a 200-year standard, I'm flabbergasted that we could possibly look at 200 years. And are we? I couldn't even find out what I couldn't even find out what the sea level rise would be in 200 years, even on the internet. So I just wonder, is that even practical and realistic, or are we just going to look ridiculous trying to do something for 200 years ahead?
Tony, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, that's on. So what are we going to do with the minutes? Are we moving on from those? We're going to.
No, but can you answer Ian's question about the 200?
Yeah, sure. The 200-year it's a standard. It's not in 200 years' time. It's a standard of protection, which is to protect something against an event which has what's called a return period of 1 in 200 years, or it's got a probability of 1 in 200 of occurring or being exceeded in any 1 year. I know it's statistics and the rest of it, and I'm not quite sure how one can describe that more clearly. But it's a standard of protection against what's termed as the 200-year storm, which has got a chance of 1 in 200 of occurring or being exceeded 1 in 200 every year. Have I got that right, Martin?
Martin Davis, do you want to come in on this? Because it's a EA sort of.
Yeah, but it is something that because of a point that Chris Lockyer has raised, it is something that I'm going to suggest that we defer that wording till later, and I'll just describe why the aims need to be changed. So we'll actually defer that standard and the proposed amendment until later because it needs to be thought a little bit more through for other reasons. Has that helped you, Ian?
If we're deferring it, then I've got no problem with it at all.
The actual wording, the proposed wording of aim 1, I think we need to go through it a little bit more clearly because it has sea level rise implications to it. But nevertheless, so if I could just explain the difference between it, which is the bulk of the paper, and explain why it needs to be changed. Have people read item 4, pages 9 and 10? Do they need any clarification of it? And I'll give that if it's needed.
I think the only clarification is why we've included the provider 200-year standard, which which possibly Martin Davis can help us with. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, Tony's described it well. It's not a 200 years as in time, it's a probability in any 1 year. So it's basically a 0.5% chance in any year that the level is exceeded. So it's a statistical thing rather than an absolute time thing. And it's a standard metric used for all coastal defense schemes. So it's just the standard, yes, it's clunky terminology for a public audience, but that's what it is used for determining design standards, economics, etc. So it's a standard industry thing.
Are you happy with that explanation then, Ian?
Yeah, well, I'm happier enough, but as I am just the public, so of course I don't understand the terminology.
No,
take it to the pub and explain it to you, Ian.
Yeah, it's taken me some time to understand it. And I've got Councillor John Loudon.
Thank you, Chair. Can I suggest that on page 10, where we have got aim 1 and we then talk about provided 200-year standard, we put an asterisk and then put a link to what Martin has just talked about, which is, as he's explained, an industry standard, so that people, no disrespect, people like Ian and me, then look at this and go, click on the link. And if you want to try and understand some technical, forgive my phrase, gobbledygook, but some technical language, then that takes you to that. I'm just trying to do that to try and move us on, Chair, because
I'm happy
almost
with
half
this.
an hour into the meeting.
Yeah, and Mary Warden-Till.
I'd just like to add my plea for clear English. We get a lot of accusations of people not being good at communication, of misinformation happening, and I really want to stop that. And so we need to put things in plain English as much as possible, please.
Yeah, and I think that would help with putting an asterisk in to explain the standard terminology that the EA are using on flood protections.
But yeah, so if I could just basically make the very point very quickly, is that the original scheme is a coast protection scheme. It was not designed to protect Sidmouth against flooding. It has a 50-year standard. It needs to be maintained. That's an existing commitment. And all that this scheme really is doing is taking the existing scheme, seeing what needs to be done to maintain it, and then to modify it so that it acts as a flood defence with a standard which has to be finally determined.
I'm fine with that. Is everyone happy with the explanation now, and happy with the adding the asterisk and the explanation of the 200?
Okay, Chair, I can get that sorted out for you. Yep, of
Thank
course,
you.
Chair. If you'd like to move on, thank you.
Move on to item 5. Chair, to outline the aims and objectives as a reminder to the group. Now, the aims and objectives were on page.
So Jeff, sorry to interrupt, but just to make absolutely clear that we haven't agreed that terminology that we just talked about. We have agreed, I think, to defer a discussion on it. So I think the minutes shouldn't say that we are agreeing to the change in the aims. We have agreed to defer the decision about that pending further discussion.
Right. So we ignore item 5 and item 4.
That's what Tony was suggesting just now.
Right. So if we then can move on to item 6, preferred option economic review for Tom to present.
Okay, bear with me. I'm just firing up the presentation. Hopefully, can that be seen?
Yeah.
And I apologise, the numbering is slightly wrong because of the change in agenda items, but it's in the right order. Okay. Oh, let's start at the beginning. Right, apologies. Sorry, there's a delay. Okay, I think we're there now. So, I was hoping to have this to you at the previous meeting, but there was a delay in producing it. And actually there was a delay in getting this. The updated economics arrived on my desk late on Friday afternoon last week, and it was only Monday when I had a chance to have a look at it. The updated economics are really important because a lot has changed since the original, since almost a year ago, well, actually more than a year ago, when we were in a position of having an underfunded scheme that we couldn't afford to deliver. A change in a government calculator was brought in the early summer, and we realised that the funding gap was gone, which was fantastic news. However, we ran it with the old data and being a bit conservative as it was a new tool, and we didn't want to say we're fully funded and find out we weren't. So we asked the consultant to essentially rerun the economics. This was also reflecting on the, again, previous meetings where we were discussing there wasn't enough funding. So it was asked to include things that weren't previously included, such as basements in Sidmouth, which were overlooked, but also the economic data provided by Devon for the Alma Bridge and the loss if that was to the link was to be lost again. So basically they put all that into the economics calculator. Meanwhile, they updated the outline, the working draft or the preferred option to reflect a more expensive, more acceptable splash wall. So this wasn't the plain concrete wall that was originally planned, or originally in the bare bones on this case. This is actually a stone-clad wall with glass as well. We shouldn't get too worried about the actual what the wall looks like. It's more the money attached to that element of the scheme. and I was expecting it to come back saying we could just about afford it, and it's a reason to push forward. And in fact, one of my later agenda items is that option amended slightly. What actually came back was a significantly more funding than anticipated. Well, and I say funding, it's funding eligibility, and I need to make that really clear. It's not definite and it's not confirmed. It's all based on approvals, but using the calculator, we can test our eligibility. Also, the eligibility is based on giving Sidmouth the standard of protection we're trying to do, so the 1 in 200 year. So if we reduce that by doing something else, the funding eligibility reduces. And the PF funding indicates that a conservative estimate is between 111% and 133. You need a project to be 100%, and so we're well over. The interesting things I mean, I guess people want to know, what does that actually mean in terms of monetary eligibility. The ultimate figure is still to be decided, because things adjust. But the best way of describing it is to look at the project construction cost. There's been quite a lot of miscommunication about project costs going forward, in terms of the project costs need to include consultants, design work, risk factors, risk budgets, as well as the construction. However, it's easier for the public to talk about construction costs and actually go, the splash wall is due to cost £2 million, and actually it's 2 million plus to the designer, etc. The easiest way to describe what the updated economics mean is, originally, the original scheme, which is the solid concrete metre high wall proposed, that had a construction cost of £5.1 million. And so that is within a project cost of over £8 million. So £5.1 million. We're now looking that we could be able to afford a scheme, if it meets all the criteria and with plenty of caveats, of up to and around £8 million of construction money. So it's a significant jump upwards. My initial thoughts were, first of all, that this additional funding could be put towards a maintenance, not directly from the government, because that's strictly for capital, but through to contributions. We've got £1.8 million of contributions pledged towards the scheme, and rather than that going capital, that could be transferred to a maintenance fund, which would give reassurance that the beach would be recharged. However, I do realise that the additional funding essentially means that options that were previously dismissed based on the overall financial cost could be looked at again. Our answer, and I still stand by it, for not investigating these options further, is because ultimately we couldn't afford the end solution. So especially when we only had a £5 million construction cost, and costs were to the bone, in fact underfunded, it seems a waste of money to investigate a solution that we couldn't afford. It's like having money to buy a Ford Focus, but you've gone into a Bentley garage. It doesn't quite. It's just a waste of time. However, the goalposts appear to have moved. So, as I mentioned, there is a potential we could revisit the options again, and this is from the beach management scheme. So this isn't completely chucking everything in the bin and starting again. it's more of a pause to look at the options that were dismissed at the beach management plan stage. As I mentioned, they have to meet the same benefits, otherwise our funding eligibility goes down. But I guess the headlines are that we could end up with a potentially more sustainable option. I do like the working draft or preferred option. I think it's a good option, but I understand there's concerns regarding its sustainability in terms of ongoing beach recharge, both in terms of the cost of the environment, but also the cost to the council. So potentially other options may enable less recharge in the future. I also take on board a lot of the concern about the splash wall raising at all, and potentially this requirement could be reduced. And also a better East Beach option could be explored. The super groin, although I believe it will work, there are concerns about both its look and its and its effect on the World Heritage Site. So this does pose some potential benefits. So I just go on to the next one. Obviously, if we were to pause the project and look at beach management plan options again, we're going to end up with a delay. And I appreciate there has been a lot of delay with this project, especially given the pandemic as well, which has further delayed progress. But we're looking at least a 6-month delay for a consultant to look at all the possible. Well, we would need to form a small subgroup possibly to put together a really tight scope to look at a couple of options to expedite these for the consultants to model, but also check for any environmental and regulatory showstoppers. So in 6 months' time, we're in a better place to know where we are in terms of would any other option still deliver the benefits required. But the knock-on effect is in 6 months, we'd have to make a decision or a recommendation to say, do we continue with the working draft preferred option, or do we have to spend a further time redoing the outline business case to adjust it for the new option, whatever that may be? As it stands today, if we submitted our outline business case, the working draft, soon, we could have construction within 2 years beginning. If we delay, if we go for a 6-month delay, and then the recommendation is to go for another option, that may end up with a 4-year delay before construction begins. There is also the risk that the alternate option may not work and it's still unaffordable. So we'll be back where we were over a year ago, seeking further contributions for an idea that can't work. However, we do have the working draft preferred option in the back of our pocket to go forward. The other thing with the revisiting options is that they haven't been tested in public as much as splash wall. They were tested in general early consultation, but because they were dismissed on cost grounds, they weren't fully tested. So we don't know if they are as acceptable. I mean, there are further negatives of moving away from the preferred option, the working draft, which essentially bigger schemes come in for more scrutiny. So the more money we're asking for, the more scrutiny we'll get. So the proof has to be there. Also, having the current proposal at either 111 or 133% funded, we're well over the threshold. So the scrutiny levels drop. Whereas as the closer we get to 100% funded, and we're trying to claim more eligibility, we get more scrutiny. There's also, again, I mentioned that I'm aware of the concerns of the splash on the super groin, and these may still be required even with further modelling going forward. And of course, the other risk is that Sidmouth and East Beach will continue to be at risk for longer, as we set off a minimum 6-month delay, potentially 4-year. And as it stands, there's been very limited consultation with public bodies, other regulatory bodies, on the alternate options dismissed at the beach management plan stage. Ultimately, the economics, if we want to change direction, the cabinet will need to decide this, and we, as an advisory group, can make a recommendation to cabinet, which can go into paper. As I mentioned, assuming a cabinet, assuming this recommendation is made, and assuming the cabinet agreed to it, in 6 months' time, the results of revisiting the options will be made available to the advisory group and to cabinet to make a decision on which direction to take. And again, it may still revert to the working draft preferred option if no better option is available. That's the end of my presentation for this bit of the agenda. As you're aware, it's come quite late in the day, so I haven't got any other slides to produce on this. So I welcome a quick discussion regarding this, and before we move on to the next items.
Thank you, Tom, for that. Can you drop the PowerPoint off so we've then got the full screen back? Thank you.
I say that.
Not the easiest thing to do.
Sorry, Debbie, I might need your assistance. Sorry, I can't.
Go into share screen, Tom, or you can do stop sharing at the very top of the screen in your view options.
So my screen's. I'm really sorry. All I can see is four cameras on my right. There we go. Right.
Do you want me to do it, Tom, for you?
Yeah, sorry. Right. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, thank you. Apologies.
So I now open it up to any question. If anyone's got any questions, if they can raise their blue hands. And Councillor Eleanor Rylance, question first. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Chair. Tom, I've got a quick question about the comparisons with Sidmouth Back Beach. Now, Sidmouth Back Beach it faces into the estuary, so it's not going to bear the full brunt of sea waves. And it's not very surprising that they've never had to use it because it's kind of sleepy back there. I mean, obviously it's important to defend that part of Sidmouth, but it is not very prone to large waves. And I'm just wondering, would this design work in the full face of the rage of the sea? Because aluminium is, it's quite a lightweight material, really. At Sidmouth, if we're going to take the comparison further, the beach there is sand. At Sidmouth, the beach is pebbled. How much battering is it really going to take if it's having pebbles chucked at it by sea waves? That's my question.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably better answered in agenda item 7, which is the next one, where we go into the details of the current working draft preferred option. Yes, I fully take on board. Sidmouth is a completely different place than the back beach, and yes, it would need to be clearly designed and suitable for a shingle beach. So it's still work in progress, but having it as an outline business case option as item 7 allows for further work to be done at the detailed design stage, and our principle of having a managed or an adaptive approach can be, is taken through the outline business case.
Okay, I've got Mary next. Mary Warden-Till.
Yeah, I've got some things that, as somebody who worked in the private sector, I'm gobsmacked about how it's going to take 4 years for this to come through again. I realise that we've got to get approval, and that slows it down. But even so, if we look at other things, it's going to, it's going to take us 4.5 years from now. it seems a very long time to me, and part of that is, could I ask who produces the outline business case? Is it in-house or do we go to outside experts?
Tom?
Yep, sure. The outline business case is produced by outside the consultancy. We don't have the resource in-house to do it. There is essentially a lot of lead time in this, and also the fact that a fundamental decision, such as changing the direction of the beach management plan, require cabinet approval. That requires recommendations from the advisory group to go into a paper to be approved by cabinet. And that process can take about 2 months in itself. You've also got the issue of there's the outline business case as it is pretty much good to go in terms of it needs a bit of a rewrite to amend it to details discussed in option 7, but essentially it could be submitted for Environment Agency approval within a few months. That means a month or so after that, assuming it's approved, we could start letting contracts to start the detailed design and going forward. However, if we go down a brand new route, a new option, the outline business case, all the documents appendices need to be rewritten. The modelling needs to be redone and rewritten, and there is going to be a delay. It's also because we're trying to be an open and transparent group now, and we welcome people to be involved with groups, however they get formed, to discuss scopes and results coming back to make sure that results and the scope, what we've asked them to do, isn't squirreled away and hidden in a room. It needs to be open and transparency. Unfortunately, being open and transparent takes more time, takes more meetings, and goes forward. I'm also trying to not be unrealistic with timings. The pandemic, which we're still not out of, I know there's hope, still not out of, has cost us time. My time and other people's has been, I haven't had the time to spend on Sidmouth as I'd like, as there's been different demands. The same with the consultancy. They are, because the schools are closed, they haven't got the staff to produce the documents as fast as we need them. So I'd rather have a conservative estimate of 4 years and people be realistic about it than say we could turn it around in 3 years. Ultimately, a big scheme like this requires a lot of work, especially if we're potentially undoing work of the past. And yes, I compared to the private sector, yes, things do move slowly in the public sector, but that's due to how we have to display everything publicly, but also the consultations we need, both public consultations, but also the ongoing consultations with statutory consultees.
Thank you, Tom, for that. I'd just like to add that it is a requirement that we would have to consider public consultations, and I believe that has to be 6 weeks, and then we have to then review the consultations, see what the answers are. Now, things like that always take time, unfortunately. So the next
Chair, can I just add to that point, please? Just quickly related to Tom's point, it's worth also pointing out, and page 13 of the papers, 7.27 discusses this, that we're already looking at 2 years before we actually put a spade in the ground on East Beach on the scheme that we currently have. So it's a delay of an additional 2.5 years on top of the current scheme. So it's still, I know it's still 4 years, but it's not a new delay of 4 years. Concurrently, we need to do the 6-month rough timescale for the modelling to analyse whether this alternative options are feasible. And then following that, we've got to rewrite the OBC if we go with another option with all the other timescales Tom's already outlined. So it's an additional 2.5 years on top of what we've got now.
Thank you, Andrew. I've got Richard Ely next. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, this is obviously very good news. It's excellent that we have more resources at our disposal, and of course, it means that options previously dismissed can be reconsidered. There are two important points to make. Firstly, any beach management scheme, any project of this scale is subject to constant review if it is being properly managed. So the idea that we should plough on, head down with something that was agreed 2 or 3 years ago is completely unacceptable. It's absolutely incorrect practice. You should be having these things constantly under review. And if this extra money means that we can do what we should be doing anyway, then that's a very good thing. Also, the second point that I'd like to make is that I'm not sure that this represents a pause or delay at all, because I don't believe for 1 millisecond that the current preferred option would ever get through the planning process and be acceptable to the planning committee. It certainly won't be acceptable to the people of Sidmouth, who will be at least 4,000 strong again on the seafront to stop it. We're not having that wall, and it isn't going to happen. It won't get through the planning process. And so therefore, rather than a delay or a pause, I think this is actually a speeding up of the process. And so I think it's excellent that we are doing this. And then a final small point, I was tempted to question it when the minutes came up. At the last meeting, I wasn't there, so I couldn't challenge the minutes, but apparently a chamber proposal was put to this group. No chamber proposal was submitted to EDDC. So goodness knows what you looked at, but it wasn't a proposal from the chamber, and it certainly wasn't a priced proposal, because this phantom proposal that was put to you last time didn't exist. So not only did it not exist, but it certainly wasn't priced. Now, I think it referred to offshore rock island options. And in that respect, what the chamber did is
You're frozen, Richard. Tom, but do you want to answer that? Unfortunately, we've lost Richard for the moment.
I still believe that the preferred option, the working draft preferred option, would gain planning permission. It does need some work, hence why at the detailed design stage, we're proposing there's additional money to make it more attractive, but also have an adaptive wall that's not there all of the time, which is the main concern. So I still believe that that would get through planning. I think we've lost Mr. Ely completely now. He's back again. Okay.
Sorry about that. I'm back on.
Yes, there is some slight error in the minutes from last meeting. We were provided with cost for the current rock islands by a contractor that was asked to do it by the Chamber of Commerce. So we've had 2 independent costs for the existing rock islands based on the construction drawings to give a good indication of how much further rock islands would cost these days. So the proposal is correct. It was not a Chamber of Commerce proposal, but it was based on figures obtained by the Chamber of Commerce, put to a sensible design, looking at how many rock islands you would need to protect both Sidmouth and East Beach from the storm and erosion. Obviously, that was based on the previous scheme construction costs of £5 million, which, as we've mentioned, and we discussed, it wouldn't add up. However, things are a little bit more flexible now in terms of the overall construction cost availability.
Thank you, Tom. Does that answer your question, Richard?
Well, yes, it does. And thank you, Tom, for that explanation. We didn't suggest any size of rock island to go offshore Sidmouth. We simply gave you two quotes, one for 2 million and one for 5.5 million for two islands the same size as the ones that are already being constructed. You could have a £2 million offshore island, you could have a £1 million offshore island, you could have a £10 million offshore island, depends how big you want to build it. We don't know because the Chamber haven't done the modelling and neither has EDDC or the BMP. So until we do that, we won't know what Rock Island would be needed, if at all. We do know that the original scheme proposed 3 islands and Ted Pinney decided not to do it. And that was the recommendation back in 1992. And so we should have the modelling and the data from that. We do know that the 2 Rock Islands at the moment work, and that there's a good chance the third one would as well. My guess, it could be quite small. Perhaps a £2 million island could obviate the need for any splash wall at all and give us the shallow water and high, even beach that we all desire. But only modelling will tell us that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. The next person is Councillor John Loudon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to start off by channeling my inner Richard Ely, but because I absolutely concur with what Richard said when he started off very upbeat by talking about this being good news, and it is to a point. So bear with me. I think the good news here is that the funding, if my basic O-level maths is still good, it is something like a 60% uplift, thereabouts. So we've gone from 5 mil to 8 mil, give or take. In those circumstances, that then opens other doors to us, doesn't it? Because up until now, we've been constrained by the money. And the money is therefore led to what it is we can possibly think about doing. Now, the possibilities, I'm not going to say are endless, but the possibilities are greater. So Tom's talked about perhaps whether or not we convert capital into maintenance, whether or not we look at reviewing the options that we've had so far. And I'm looking at his document that is with the agenda. So page 13, if I've understood this correctly, he has set out there at page 13 under number 7, 2 options. One is basically continue with what we've been talking about so far, because that's what the money can afford. And to quote or misquote Richard Ely, you know, that would be foolish to do that. The second one is to pause and to review in light of the new funding. Yes, it will bring delay. That's where the good news starts not to be quite as good news as one might think to start with. Because, and I'm sorry, I did mention at the beginning, Cliff Road is in my ward. I have to look at Paul, I have to look at John here, who must be going, I thought last time we knew where we were going. I thought we knew roughly the timescale we were heading towards, and now they will be sat there, I'm sure, and they can talk for themselves, thinking, oh, what, more delay? So from that perspective, that's the negative. So, and Jeff, you know, because we've had a brief conversation over the last day or so. Is there not a third option we can think about where we review what we can get for our money, but at the same time, is there not something we can do in the short term to support the East Beach Cliffs, whether that's at Pennington Point or wherever? I'm no expert. I'm just a local minor politician, but it seems to me that if we can find some way of marrying the two things together, doing something in the short term to give interim protection at least to the cliffs there, as well as looking at what our options might be going forward. And if we can avoid the 4,000 people marching along the seafront, I, for one, would be very happy, as I'm sure everybody else here will be. So, Chair, is there not at least a third way, to misquote Tony Blair?
Thank you, John, for that. Yes, my immediate concern was when I heard there might be a delay, I was very concerned about Cliff Road residents and how they would take that. I have asked the question, could we put a temporary rock eventment underneath the cliffs? And it could take 6 months to a year to do, more than likely a year. And we could import the rock, use it as a temporary. It might be acceptable for Natural England. It might be acceptable for planning, but it would have to go through planning. It would have to be consulted on. And then once the rock eventment had been put there, and then we get the full plans in say at the most 4 years time. Once the plans are ready to go, we can use that rock elsewhere on the scheme. So it's not money wasted.
Can I just interject, Chair? Sorry, can I just interject clarification? So you talked about 6 to 12 months if that were a possible option. Can I just ask to be reminded, if we were moving ahead as we anticipated at the last meeting, what would be the earliest point at which any protective works would be established under East Beach anyway?
That's a good point. It's basically bringing a temporary scheme to to protect the cliffs to an earlier date, which would be a good thing. So it's trying to marry up the disadvantages of delaying it for 4 years and the advantage of bringing a temporary scheme in. But that is for this group to discuss further.
It's only an extra 2 years, Chair, not 4 years.
Yeah.
Chair, can I just interject and clarify a few things? So, yes, the essentially permanent rock revetment solution at East Beach is not acceptable. And we can't have a long conversation about why it's not acceptable, but it isn't. There are many reasons why a permanent solution will not be acceptable. However, we can entertain the idea and investigate a temporary solution, as in temporary rock revetment, which will then be moved to whatever the end solution is, be it a super groin or perhaps a offshore rock island. I have spoken to various people, both in the designated bodies, but also within the planning and the Environment Agency. And I think there is a possibility this could happen, and there is precedent for temporary works within a designated site. Slight complication is a World Heritage Site, so it's actually a world designated height. It's not European or national, but there is scope for it to happen on a temporary basis, based on the fact there'll be an exit strategy. So in other locations, there isn't an exit strategy, and this is why there's complications. Whereas as part of the application, we would need a fixed exit strategy, which is the beach management plan. So that hopefully answers that concern. I think the concerns is, speaking to the designated bodies, is that that they would understand a kind of something. They like we were expecting something to be constructed within 2 years. I mean, it could be sooner and front-ended with work at East Beach, but that was the anticipation. And their opinion is that is still a sensible timescale to just do it once, as in the end solution. Don't do it temporary works. However, if we do go down the route of pausing and up to a 4-year delay, the indication was they can understand the concern. They can understand this is additional few years wait, and actually a temporary solution. They might entertain the idea. I'm not saying they'll definitely do it, but it's a possibility.
Thank you, Tom. Right, next questioner is Paul Carew from Cliff Road. So hopefully that discussion might have placated some of your points that you were going to about make. Thank you. Over to you, Paul.
Not totally, I'm afraid, Chairman. I've been sitting on this committee and its predecessors for the past 10 years, longer, I think, than anyone, possibly than John Golding. 10 years ago, we were told there would be a scheme in place in 5 years from then, in other words, in 2016. As one can see, that has not exactly materialized. We're now talking a further 4 years. In that time, Pennington Point is likely to have receded to the point where the Environment Agency will say it no longer protects Sidmouth, therefore protecting it is no longer part of the scheme, and therefore we can't do anything about East Beach at all. It's a further delay. If we're talking here about a possible temporary solution, but we have not, but everybody is saying it might not happen. I don't understand how it's going to be funded. We keep looking at other proposals. If the Mars lander, which had started 10 years ago, and 5 years ago they suddenly said, no, we're going to go to Venus. That's roughly what we're saying at the present moment. We've looked at lots and lots of possible schemes. The BMP looked at some 20 possible things and decided eventually that the current scheme is the correct one. We can't keep changing directions all the time. I also agree with Mary that 4 years seems ridiculous, but that seems to be the way that the public sector works, I'm afraid. I also disagree with Richard about not obtaining planning permission. This has been through so much consultation that we should be able to get it, and Tom himself said that a few minutes ago. So a delay and a possible scheme that might or might not happen within the next year to try and a rock revetment. If we got a rock revetment, fine, I wouldn't have a problem. But at the present moment, there is no certainty of that whatsoever. It isn't funded, it doesn't have planning permission, and I would suggest we don't pause the current scheme until such time as those particular items are in position, in which case we can say, yes, there will be protection for Pennington Point, and yes, then we can go ahead and look at other options.
Thank you, Paul. Tom, do you want to come back on any of that?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of your points. I can answer the funding question, and that would be from the whole beach management scheme plan money. Obviously, prior to this, we were pared back to a £5 million construction cost scheme and couldn't afford it at that. So we couldn't afford to do extra work in advance. Because we have a bit more, bigger funding envelope, we could invest in rock sooner, get it on the beach, and then the same rock is then reused in the end solution. So there is a higher cost in doing that because you're double handling materials, but it does offer the benefits that will reduce erosion risks, slow erosion sooner, and also offer further protection to Sidmouth from easterly storms. And I'd like to think that this would be possible for a planning application, but again, it's relatively new. We've only been talking about this since Monday in terms of the new funding opening doors. So I appreciate this meeting is both well timed and ill timed, that we haven't fully been able to bottom out and speak to people at length in formal consultation to say, yes, we definitely would get planning for a temporary structure, or no, there's no chance. At the moment, the early conversations say, I think, given the sorry, I'm struggling for the word. Given the other examples, there's a better word for it. There's already there are already examples around the Devon coastline where temporary solutions have been implemented in designated sites, either with Natural England's and the other bodies either blessing or objecting, but because of their temporary nature, they have been accepted. So precedent, that's the word.
Precedent.
Yes, precedent. Yes, that's the word.
Thank you, Chris. Right. Ian Barlow, if you'd like to come in on this.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of it's been covered, but I would just say that we want to be careful that we're starting to sound like we're using common sense. That if we can pause, and I think this is a good idea, if we can pause, but at the same time, basically protect the residents of Cliff Road, which was one of the main reasons this started, and also Pennington Point, that by putting down some rock armour there temporarily, like they have in Branscombe. So, it's not even far away. On the World Heritage Site, we have a temporary scheme, and I say temporary, that's been there for 7 or 8 years now. I think it's been renewed, the temporary scheme. So, there is a precedent here. It's not far away. You can see that it works. It gives protection to the base of the cliff, which is what we need for the Cliff Road residents. And then we can go back to something that will, again, alleviate the problems that Sidmouth sees with the splash wall, whether it's necessary or not. And surely this is just a good thing to do. I don't want to go into the details of it, but if we can put up a temporary rock scheme that can be then reused, if we think that the groin, super groin, offshore, whatever it might be that we come up with can be reused there. Yes, it's going to add a little bit of cost, but the cost on the overall scheme will be insignificant. And I just think that, let's just, I'm not going to say vote to it. That's not my job. That's your job. But, let's do this and just say that we're going to put in within, 6 months. And I agree that 4 years is too long, that we could just push forward with an emergency, whatever you want to call it, to get through planning, to put some rock armour at the bottom of the cliff there, to give it some protection so that the Cliff Road residents will be able to sleep easier at night, and we can then go back so that we can go to the town with a proper project that everyone's going to be happier with. And you may well find that actually the rock revetment works so well at the bottom of the cliffs, we sort of think, well, perhaps we're wasting money, 9 million, 8 million, 6 million, whatever, and that actually we could do it for 1 million and save the government and this country 5 million quid, which to my way of thinking is exactly why I got involved in the council. We don't want to waste public money for a Rolls-Royce project that actually will do exactly the same as our Ford Focus as it's been used before project, and end up with that.
Thank you, Ian. Bearing in mind this is being recorded, I wouldn't like to suggest that we're putting something in temporary, but actually we're going to do it for permanency. So
it's common sense, of course. We've got to be careful we're not seen to do that either.
Yeah. Councillor Denise Bicton, please, quickly.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say a big thank you really for revisiting the finances. It feels like the planets are aligning, and things are coming together nicely to realise that we have a bit of spare cash, and also that we were plodding along on the M1 when actually we wanted to be on the M3. You can't keep going if you're on the wrong road. It was coming up against too much opposition. It wasn't feeling right, I think, with a lot of us. This feels a lot better to me. I think it's really thinking outside the box. I hate that saying, but to put in something like the revetment, which we know in the short term should protect immediately, but then use it again when we know what the plans are going to be. I think it's just very common sense, genius almost. I like rock islands. I think that they seem to have worked very well in Sidmouth. We've got their lovely sandy beach. We could end up with a beautiful sandy beach as a result. We don't know that for sure without modelling, obviously. So yeah, if less money is then needed for the wall and for recharging it in the future, then that also gives us more money for the pot, presumably. I think this is a really important thing to revisit and pause but protect at the same time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Denise. Councillor Stuart Hughes,
Yeah.
I'm sure you're going to be talking about your bridge.
Well, maybe. Thanks, Chair. I mean, let's cast our mind back a few years ago, before we actually got round to building the new Alma Bridge. The county applied to put some temporary rock revetment down to actually protect the old bridge. That wasn't allowed. If we had that permission to put temporary rock revetment down, it could have stayed there for up to 10 years. Martin Davis will bear me out on that one. It wasn't allowed. Natural England would allow it to proceed. You're now saying that there's a possibility that we can get some rock revetment as a temporary measure put in front of the cliffs at Salcombe Regis, which would actually protect the cliffs and buy us some time. But we're not guaranteed that that is going to happen. And to be quite honest, I was horrified to think that we could actually delay another 4 years, up to another 4 years in going forward. Because I personally believe that if you proceed with the scheme you've got now, you can actually go and revisit. We did that with the main scheme on the beach. I mean, it had 2 groins, and then we revisited it and we put another groin in place. You can look at that at a future date, but at least Sidmouth would actually have some protection. We would be moving forward. Cast your mind back about 10, 13 days ago when we had the severe southeasterlies coming in. Look at the issue then. And it wasn't really severe, but if we did have a severe easterly storm, it would take out the eastern town. I'm horrified to think that we could actually be considering delaying this for 4 years. If a temporary rock revetment can go in, if we could get that agreed, then maybe. But until then, I would say go ahead with the scheme, because the other thing is, of course, government, you can't count on the funding will be available from the county council or even from local levy funding. And I mean, Martin Davis would mostly explain that anyway. So I'll leave it like that, Chairman. Thanks.
Thank you, Stuart. Tom, is that possible? You're on mute.
Sorry, which point was possible? So there's quite a few points made.
How soon could we get a green light on the a temporary rock revetment? We seem to have got certain playing cards, but we can't play them in the right order.
So obviously the very rough outline conversations I had with designated bodies were only willing to entertain the idea if we end up with the 2 years delay, so the 4 years construction. So we're not going to know that for 6 months. So I think putting in an application now, bearing in mind that they're expecting a full planning permission to come for an outline business case within a year, they might kick back more. Again, it's something we need to work on, and it's just too early days to really say. The other point that was made there was regarding sort of reviewing and going forward. And obviously, our original plan was with the outline business case was to get something to be signed off for funding that would essentially, in principle, work from a flood and coastal risk perspective. The details, how high the wall is, where it's raised, what it looks like, does it come up when it needs to, that would have been thrashed out in the detailed design stage. But ultimately, the scheme budget would have been about the same price. We could, and it's been suggested that we put in the outline business case for what we have now, and that goes forward and gets approved, and then we can run this modelling consecutively, and then come back and address it. The risk is that the Environmental Agency's assessors will be fully aware that there is a viable, cheaper scheme that's already been promoted. So why are we going back asking them for additional £1 million for a bigger, better scheme when actually the cheaper one would have done, appreciating that a cheaper scheme will likely require more maintenance. And it would take a lot of backpedaling to suddenly disprove the scheme we'd put forward, outline business case to go forward. So we only really get one shot at this money in the foreseeable future. 50 years time, things may change. There'll be completely different ways of getting money available. But in the next 10 years, at least, this is the only single shot we're going to have to get money. So it's a critical decision on whether or not we pause and try and aim for a bigger, better scheme, and try our hardest to get temporary protection. But there's no guarantees today that will happen, or we keep going.
Thank you, Tom. Tony, I believe that you want to come in on this. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Mary and John are before me, Chairman.
Okay, so if John Radford wants to come in.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
That is fully funded. That seemed a distant dream 12 months ago, but thanks to Tom's efforts, we've got there. We have a scheme that 2 separate firms of engineers have endorsed and which is currently ready to proceed. We have done a substantial amount of work on it. I can understand the siren calls of looking at some other possibilities, but all of this is tenuous in the extreme. You haven't got the consent for rock. Know that you're going to get them. The amount of delay to be involved is a minimum of 2.5 years. We are being asked to swap a bird in the hand for a very tenuous bird in the bush. Please, can we get on and give effect to what we have got and not fantasize too much about what we may be able to do in the future? It's simply not certain enough. And I note both Tom and Andrew have made comments. They believe it in the present scheme as being effective, as indeed the 2 firms of engineers have confirmed that it would be. I am much worried by the possibility that we may lose a substantial amount of time for something that may never come to fruition. Thanks.
Thank you, John. I do share your concerns. Now, if I've lived on Cliff Road, I'll be thinking exactly the same as you. The point that I've had conversations about this temporary scheme, and it is the exit strategy that we can pretty well guarantee that it would be removed at a certain date is possibly the key driver to them allowing temporary permission. So I go on to the next questioner, Mary Warden-Till again, please.
Hi, thanks, Chairman. I'm very concerned that we need to get protection for the cliffs and so on. So, you know, I'm not against anything Paul or John has been saying. It's imperative. But what I would like to know is we can get cheaper protection by using geotextile tubes. Tom was talking about it last time and said that they were very cheap to do. Could we put a temporary geotextile tube at the base instead of rocks? That it would be a lot easier to fill and to empty again and move when it was temporary. It might be more acceptable to various bodies. And also, if we're doing a scheme, if we go forward with this scheme that we've got now to get funding, if we decide we can bring it in cheaper by doing something offshore and not doing the 2.6 million splash wall, money back to the Environment Agency? Are there penalties? I don't understand how public sector stuff works. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, Tom, do you want to go through the GeoTube? I have privately thought about that possibility, and also the other issue that Mary brought up. You're on mute again. Thank you.
Right, geotextiles, geotubes. So we were talking about them in previous meetings about being submerged out at sea underwater. The issue of putting them on land is unfortunately best demonstrated at Dawlish Warren, where they were installed and vandalised. So you ultimately can't stop someone walking along them with a big knife, and that's ultimately what's caused their failure. So they are also quite attractive when they're exposed. So although there are conversations to be had, because this is a World Heritage Site. It's not just some cliffs. It's a World Heritage Site. So even putting rock armor, which appears to be natural, although it's not, it will be granite. It will be not the same rock as local. You know, there's more arguments of something that is but mildly in keeping, whereas putting a great big black or grey the textile material right across the front of the beach. I mean, it could be tested, and again, as an emergency solution, it does possibly stack up. It's just I have concerns that someone on the public will vandalise it, and it will slowly unravel. But again, potentially offshore solutions don't need to be the rock islands we've alluded to. We were hoping in the current outline business case, and there is money to do it, to include further modelling for a submerged geotube, for example, and with the idea of that would sustain a healthier beach for longer. But ultimately, the principle of the preferred option working draft is the same, as in a splash defence if required, but also a long super groin structure to keep material within the system. So move southwest and then easterly push it back, and if not, we have to recycle it, moving it from East Beach back to Town Beach, and that is the general principle of the scheme. Deviating from that excessively and cost-wise as well is the implications of what we're talking today. The second thing I guess was money on how, and we do risk talking about it that the money is given, and we've got this money. It is eligibility. So as it stands today, if we were pushing forward with the preferred option working draft, we would go in with a PF calculator of say 111%. So the government think, oh, this is overfunded. It's a good use of public funds. It's not 100%. It's more. Later on in the project, because there's risk built into it, we may not use that risk. And depending on how the agreements have been set up in terms of the contributions, the risk pot is basically either given back to central government or to the various bodies that have contributed. That's a discussion for another day. So there's no real penalty of giving money back. It's just obviously we've got the eligibility to, if we need to and can prove that we need it and can spend it to go forward with it. Yes, there is no real, but there is a penalty for going overspending. As in, we'll be in the same position we were over a year ago when we were £1.5 million short of an affordable scheme. Obviously, now we have, in my view, a perfectly workable, viable scheme to either implement or fall back on, and it's well within the funding envelope.
Thank you, Tom, for that. And finally, Tony Birch.
Can I just answer that. You can get sand-coloured geotextiles, not visually intrusive. And if somebody does put a knife through them, if it's only supposed to last for a couple of years, how fast would it deflate?
If Martin is still available, I might ask him for his experience at Dawlish Warren, but if not, I will.
Martin, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I can cover that, Tom. Based on our experiences of Dawlish Warren, you wouldn't use geotubes, sand-coloured or otherwise, for the base of Sidmouth Cliffs. It wouldn't really be an option you would choose for the reasons Tom outlines. They can deflate very quickly, so no, they're just too vulnerable a structure if they're exposed. So we wouldn't sort of be supporting based on evidence, put it that way. Just picking up on, I can cover some other points now if you want, or
yes, please.
Just to sort of summarize conversations I've had with Tom, the first thing to do in the immediate term is to check the economics, because all of this conversation is based around an assumption there is more money, and the first thing to do obviously is to check that the economics identify a sound, because there is quite a jump from previous eligibility. So the first prudent thing to do is to check that, and I think that's doable in the next month. So that's an important thing to do, so we know where we're starting from. The other sort of points I would say are, it's all about long-term sustainable management, and there are obviously flood risk benefits to reducing the rates of erosion at Pennington Point. So I totally understand the logic of where possible to explore interim works. Obviously, because from a flood risk management point of view, there are benefits. Obviously, it's others to decide planning permissions and whether it passes the HABS regs assessment. But in terms of the logic, I get that. Precedent, as Tom mentioned, is Westwood Ho, where similar works, rock armour works, have been done as interim ahead of a final scheme. It's adjacent to a triple SI. It isn't in a Jurassic Coastal HABS designated SAC, but it's still a sensitive site. So yeah, I think there is a longer term picture to think about, and if the interim works, is finding the common ground between the interim works and the preferred longer term scheme. And if there is common ground, whether it's temporary rocks that then will be used as a final solution, I think that makes sense. It fits with a sort of what they call now an adaptive pathway approach. So you're doing temporary works, adapting to a longer term solution. There are probably some assumptions to challenge around envisaging a wonderful, healthy beach if you get a rock groin. I think long-term sea level rise trends, fixed structures in front of promenades means there will be a gradual lowering of beaches anywhere that there's hard structures. So I think it's important to probably myth-bust some of those visions of healthy sandy beaches in places like Sidmouth, because long-term trends is likely to draw down anyway. But yes, I certainly understand people's thinking as expressed.
Thank you, Martin, for that. Tony, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, if I may, thank you. And Martin's last points burst a bubble for me, so I might come back to that in a moment. But the long-term trend of beaches lowering anyway. Okay. The outline business case has lost sight of an important aspect of the scheme, which is that, I'll come back to, which is the fact that the original scheme is a coast protection scheme that needs to be maintained if its standard of service is to be maintained. It doesn't major on that at all, and that's a commitment that East Devon has already got, is to maintain the existing scheme. And the principal maintenance requirement is to maintain the beach levels above certain trigger levels, which were set out in the original beach management plans. Those beach levels and beach volume those triggers were set before climate change was a design requirement. So they will need to be raised in order to take into account climate change. It's arguable that the current level of protection, coast protection, has dropped below the 50-year standard for which it was originally designed because of climate change and sea level rise. So in order to go forward and maintain that standard of protection, you've got to raise those triggers. In doing that, you'll clearly keep pace with climate change to protect the seawall from structural damage and undermining. But in doing so, there's also a risk that you'll elevate the beach levels. If you raise the trigger levels, you'll finish up with an elevated beach. And if that occurs, then the beach level is going to rise closer and closer to the existing prom level. And therefore, you're going to run the risk of green water overtopping, which currently does not happen at all, or does not happen very frequently. And green water overtopping produces higher volumes of overtopping and greater flood risk. So there's a conundrum. In order to protect the sea wall to maintain its standard of service, you need to raise the trigger levels for beach recycling and recharging. But by doing that, and that will lead to an increase in beach levels, by doing that, you will increase the flood risk because you'll increase the risk of green water overtopping. So the existing scheme, and that's what you have with the existing scheme and the existing options that have been described. That's been overlooked in the outline business case, I think because it wasn't high on people's radar at the time. But I've been looking into it, and that's what I've discovered. So there's a conflict there between the two if you go with the existing proposals, which is to maintain the beach. The way of overcoming that would be to put in the splash wall. But then your fallback position for future proofing is that you'll have to continue raising the splash wall. It doesn't give you future proofing. If on the other hand, you attenuate the waves before they hit the beach, which is the original options, which is exactly what the existing scheme does with the existing breakwaters, then you need to maintain the beach levels at their triggers. You may not need to increase the trigger levels to take account of climate change. Therefore, you remove the potential risk of increasing flooding at the same time because you're attenuating the waves before they hit the beach. It also potentially removes the need to raise the splash wall. If that's the case, then going with an offshore option, attenuating the waves before they hit the beach, is actually giving Sidmouth future proofing because you'll get your protection now. HR Wallingford's work for the original scheme shows that it will provide a level of protection. It needs to be quantified what it is. You'll get that now. You'll reduce the need for long-term maintenance. You'll open up the beaches for better amenity. And I take what Martin says, whether you will or not. So, I take his point on board about that. So you reduce future maintenance costs, but more importantly, you'll future-proof Sidmouth because with offshore structures, you provide the protection now and you future-proof Sidmouth because your fallback position 20, 30, 50 years down the line is to start raising the splash wall, not start raising it now, start raising the splash wall in 50 years time or where it's needed. So those are, I think, quite critical issues when you come to looking at which scheme to go for that I think need much more careful thought. And my final point is I think it was Councillor Moulding, well, no, not Councillor Moulding, one of the councillors suggested an option for deferring it and putting in temporary works in the interim. I've got another one, which is another option possibly, would be to go ahead with the East Beach scheme and defer what you do on the main beach, pending further investigation and better use of the money that's available.
Thank you, Tony, for that. Richard Ely wants to come back in, and then I've got Ian Barlow, and then I think we call it a day on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to endorse what Councillors Loudon, Bickley and Barlow were saying about a temporary revetment. It's something that the Chamber has been proposing and arguing for many years now, and I think that's a very good idea. The other thing to point out is, of course, we had a temporary revetment installed in 2003, which worked highly successfully for 17 years. and prevented almost any erosion taking place behind it for all that time. When it failed last year and its integrity was lost, we saw 2 meters of erosion happen within 12 months. So the effectiveness of a revetment on East Beach has already been demonstrated very effectively. We've already had one. We've already done this. I think that's important to record. Thank you very much. I agree with what Tony just said as well in many respects.
Thank you, Richard. And Ian Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out, we keep saying about the World Heritage Site and how we can't do these things because we're worried about them. The World Heritage Site is 95 miles long, approximately. We're talking about a 200-meter length of it. And I just think that we need to put it in perspective that we're not trying to ruin the World Heritage Site and that it would be a temporary thing until we come up with a better solution. So I think that's the thing. I also agree with what Tony Birch said, apart from the fact of this beach recharging. It hasn't been done in the past. And I think anyone that knows that beach, just, as I said, I'm not an expert, but looking at it practically, you do it and the tide can just, you can't beat nature and it will wash it away literally the next day. So, you could spend 3 months recharging the beach and then a storm will come along and it'll be gone. So I just think that we need to be realistic. We can't rely on recharging. We can't afford it going forward. We can't afford it now. So why is it going to be any different in the future? And I, for one, would be very concerned about anything that relies on us constantly recharging the beach, because you've just got to be realistic. It's not going to happen, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Right, can we move on to item 7, revised preferred option proposal, which Tom is going to present. If anyone wishes to comment on this item, can they raise their electronic hand? Whilst the slideshow is on, I can't see the hands, unfortunately.
That's all right, Chair. I can let you know.
Thank you.
Can people see that now?
Yeah.
So I apologise. It's obviously being slightly out of order from it's just the agenda was written before the economics news. So this is still an important part because this is what we are still planning to submit to the Environment Agency, but also as a backup if we do choose a different option. So obviously we've had a lot of people not liking some of the proposals, the preferred option, and we've basically listened, is what we're trying to say. So we understand no one wants a 1 meter high wall permanently, be it glass or anything on day one. So we're also understanding that although it's an outline business case, the understanding is that we will build this. That's not the case. Planning will decide if we build it or not. The outline business case needs to be a good enough indication of what funding we're getting to build what. So we've basically had further adjusted the preferred option to fit what we've heard back from listening to people. The other benefits is that this would take very little changes to make and it could be submitted quickly. Obviously, what is the preferred option or a working draft? That's again, and that is what we're proposing with the revised one is everything in the sea remains as it is. So that's the super groin, the East Beach recharge, the modifications training wall, the slipway improvement, and town beach recharge. Also, as I mentioned, it gives some flexibility to look at offshore submerged geotubes to see if they're beneficial at retaining the beach. And that's the general plan of what has been proposed. As you can see, a bigger, healthier beach everywhere. What we've changed in this revision is the change from a solid concrete wall to a attractive glass or stone-clad permanent 1 meter high wall to a temporary top-up wall. So this essentially means the wall will be raised slightly and a a top-up element will be added prior to a storm and removed after. And there's also an opportunity to look at different alignments. So rather than keeping the splash wall at the height where it is, we could look at moving it back in places and reducing the required height. There's also options for further design of playing around with exactly what height we need. The best example locally of this is, as mentioned before, was at back of Sidmouth, and this is the back beach, and this is the temporary top-up wall they have. And you can probably see by the views for the cafes and pubs are really quite important. So that's why the wall was kept lower at this point, and it has the availability to be topped up. Obviously, this is a still water level with some waves, but obviously it's not the full force of the sea. So they would need to be a slightly different structure, but they also don't need to be fully watertight compared to the ones at Sidmouth. And we believe they were in technical feasibility. What it would mean is basically rebuilding of the splash wall and the allowance in the foundations for it to be topped up in the future. And it means the boards can be brought up to 1 meter height whenever we need them, and they can be stored very locally, so that they could be in benches, in boxes like they are at Sidmouth, next to the wall. Obviously, the prediction is that these will actually be unneeded for the first however many years, and as the climate changes, we get more regular and impressive storms. They'll be needed more and more, but we can adapt to it and put them out. There's also the ability that they're adaptive. So should a section of the beach be depleted following a storm, we can put them up in discrete sections rather than a blanket 1 meter everywhere. We can also manage them, see how they perform over time. One thing they do require is they require some buy-in from the community to help operate. As you know, we can't commit East Devon Resource to operate this splash wall every time it's needed, which of course the first period in time will be very little, but as we increase, or we get the big 1 in 200 year chance event happening in 4 years time, then we might need it. But it's an adaptive solution for an unknown future. The other thing of putting this in the outline business case is it means it doesn't fix us on this option. This is a technically feasible option to deliver an adaptive wall. There are many other options, including flip benches, known as the Sidmouth bench, which Tony's outlined prior meetings, and other solutions such as raising flood barriers, but also concertina floodgates and other multi-folding floodgates, which generally keep the view open most of the time with only slight obstructions of the view. Having it an adaptive approach in the outline business case gives us this flexibility going forward. It also gives us an alternative to look at alternate alignments. So I know there's been some concerns about the ramp proposal, which some of the funding we have is set aside for improving the ramp slipway. Obviously, if we don't do that, that funding disappears. But obviously, there's some concern that waves will run straight up this slipway and cause flooding. So an option which has been talked about, and we haven't really discussed it with the parties directly involved, was actually why does the splash wall need to be right where it is now, around at the east end of town? It could be much lower, set back, and have a few floodgates, which would basically contain the water and be able to keep any heights much lower down. So it's something that could easily be discussed and brought in the future, but putting it in the outline business case, it doesn't preclude any of this. It means it can be at the detailed design stage. We can change it as much as we can, as long as we keep the principles the same. Yeah, as I mentioned, it keeps option open. I've gone on to my next slide, and it just removes the commitment for a solid wall at this stage, which is what a lot of people are concerned of. And it also means that there's further opportunity for the advisory group to feed into the scope of the detailed design. I think, oh, there's some concerns. Sorry, I'm not quite there yet. Obviously, these boards will be labour intensive, as I mentioned, and they look ugly once temporarily installed. So potentially they could be put up for a whole year if climate change and storminess increases. I say year, they could be put up for the whole winter period because it might not be cost effective for them to have them removed in between storms. They might also be called to just be put up for spray and stone overtopping because cars are being damaged by pebbles, but it's actually not causing flooding. So they might be a bit more labour intensive. So that is kind of the current working draft third option, which is based on listening to everyone's concerns and working within the current the then current and still current financial envelope. That this is affordable and it's doable and gives enough money within the envelope. Now we have the opportunity to move some money from capital into maintenance to the future. So there could be quite a healthy maintenance budget going forward, which we didn't have before. So it's certainly not got the, it's certainly not committing itself to money we don't have. We do have and will have a money budget going forward to put to maintaining this. So this is essentially where the outline business case is today. It's looking at this as a viable option going forward. I've come to the end of section 7, so I'll welcome any questions, any hand raised before I move on to section 8, which I'll go through quickly. So I'm just trying to remove my share screen again. Stop share. There we go.
Yeah. If anyone's got any questions, if they'd like to raise your hands. We've gone through most of these before, so if we can make them as brief as possible. And I've got the first questioner is Mary Warden-Till. Thank you.
Chairman, I'd like to know what we know already about the foundations of the dwarf wall. So if we're considering higher and new foundations, do we know what's there already and whether increased foundations are actually necessary?
Tom?
The short answer is no, we don't know what's under there. The records don't exist. The long answer is that from all my experience is that of when we've had to raise walls in the past, they are on different design standards and won't take raising. They won't have the mass below the ground or the leverage, or indeed the steel might have corroded over time. So I would be very surprised that the existing wall would be able to be raised. And in fact, the existing wall probably isn't up to the standard required these days as construction standards have increased over time.
Thank you, Tom. And now, Chris Lockyer.
It's not so much a question, Chair, it's more of a comment. I think as a general principle, we should be looking to spend capital rather than putting it aside for revenue costs, because I think if we can invest in a permanent solution, which doesn't require us maintaining it or as much money on maintenance, I think it's more likely to be successful.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions? No. So do you want to move on to item 8 then, Tom?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, just bear with me.
No problem.
Screen 2. Right. Okay, so I'm gonna whittle through this because I think given the option, as in option A, as I've just described, to me sounds significantly more beneficial than this approach, which we've discussed. I think we started discussing it at the last advisory group meeting and have since discussed it in various groups since. But it's lost its appeal given the fact that we can achieve essentially the same outcome by doing option A. So this is the managed adaptive approach. which essentially means rebuilding the splash wall, but not raising it to the full 1 metre height. It means that Sidmouth won't be fully protected against a 1 in 200 year chance event on day one. So the benefits, as in the funding eligibility, are less, because it won't have the ability to put a temporary defence up like option A. But it means that while sea level rise hasn't, there isn't big numbers of sea level rise today, into the future when there is, means that the wall can be raised. So the standard position may not be a 1 in 200 years chance event, but it will be good enough. The reason why we hadn't looked at this before, because again, the old PF calculator, the funding was far too tight. Again, having this additional funding means rather than trying to spend more money, we're asking for less money because the solution isn't as effective. It doesn't offer the benefits. But obviously the benefits are that we're not going to end up with a solid 1 metre high wall on day one. And we can adapt it to suit our changing climate. So the concerns is that because, as I mentioned, we won't get the benefits day one. So we also might have to pare back the design. So it may still be as it is today, a concrete wall, but just slightly higher. We will also need to state and model when it will need to be raised. I've only just had the figures back from this, and they're still a bit rough. So if we do choose to go for this option, which I don't think we need to, but correct me if I'm wrong, this will delay the OBC's production by 3 months, as it still needs some economic remodelling and some modelling to look at its effect. And it'll probably cost about 30k to do this. And the risk is that we find we can only delay raising by a few years. So actually year 10, we might have to raise it to the full 1 metre height. And this is just to show an example of what could be needed. Quickly go through that. And actually, that brings me to the end of it. Again, please let me know if I'm incorrect, but I don't believe this is now a route we should be going down.
Thank you, Tom, for that. If we've got any questions on this, please raise your blue hands. And have I got any blue hands?
No, I don't see any either, Chair.
Right, there's plenty of information in the agenda pack, so I'm sure everyone's read it and taken it in. So we now move on to agenda item 9, which I need to refer back to my script. So if Mary can speak on this, which has been presented by the VGS. It's a very detailed report. There was a lot of information in it. There's a lot of references, which is very useful. And the VGS asked us to put this on the agenda to be noted. Thank you. Over to you, Mary.
Thanks. I can't really say too much about it because Jeremy did the major part of the work. Just to try and pull everything together so that people have got a reference. It wasn't meant to mean anything. It was just doing what the VGS do, which is putting forward information so that people can have an informed debate. And of course it has implications for the risk when we're looking at it of not getting through planning, because these are the sorts of things that people might be bringing up. If anybody wants to ask anything, I'll do my best to answer.
So if anyone's got any questions for Mary, if they'd like to put their blue hands up. And I don't seem to have got any blue hands. But what I will say, Mary, thank you to the VGS for providing this information. it's got so many references and stuff. I think it would take a year for me to read through it all. A lot of it I have written, but it will be very useful for referring back, and it will save me a lot of time in the future. So thank you for that. So we now move on to item 10, the advisory group recommendation on proceeding. Now, based on the discussions we've had, I'm looking for a clear steer from the advisory group of a recommendation of what action to take next. As you will see in the agenda papers, a choice will be presented to you. So I pass over to Debbie, who's come up with this wonderful on-screen system. So let's see if it can work.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So members of the advisory group, I'm shortly going to present to you a poll. So Zoom has the facility to have a poll. So I would ask just those members of the advisory group, please, to pick your option from that when you see it.
Jeff, I'm sorry I tried to talk a moment ago, but I was on mute. May I just say something?
Yeah.
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 Could I suggest the third option, which was, as I say earlier, which was to carry on with the e-speech scheme, but pause the Sidmouth speech scheme to see how better the money can be spent?
Can that be done, Debbie? But you've already done the questionnaire, haven't you?
I would support that, Chair.
I'll need a few moments, Chair, just to make an amendment. But let's clarify what the options are, shall we, before I present them?
Yep.
Would that be the best thing to do?
Yes, please. Yep.
So, from my understanding, the one option is to pause and review effectively. So that's what's set out in your agenda papers at the moment. I'll just get to the right section. Bear with me a second.
Okay, can I just comment? You were talking also about the option to pause and review, but at the same time go for a temporary storage solution for the rock as a revetment on East Beach, which I suppose might be slightly different to simply just pause.
Chris, if I can just clarify, it would be inferred in that option to pause that we would look at temporary solution at East Beach to protect there. But as Tom outlined earlier, that would be in a timescale that would fit with the expectations currently. So we wouldn't be looking at putting that, let's say for argument's sake, temporary rock revetment there within 6 months, because as it stands now, if we went forwards with the working draft option, we wouldn't be delivering a spade in the ground there within 6 months. So I hope that adds some clarity. I think also Tom just wanted to discuss some implications of Tony's third option about continuing with the supergrown on East Beach and pausing the rest of the scheme. If you could, Tom.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andrew. The East Beach scheme currently consists of a supergroin and recharging, and there are concerns that the supergroin, is not the right structure, both visually, but also for its effect on the World Heritage Site. So charging on with that. If we're going to play around with things, it's going to be difficult. Also, it might affect the funding because, again, potentially an offshore rock island solution may be beneficial, but it may cost more. So there are quite a few implications of advancing it and then having to backtrack. I'd have to look into it, and I've not had the time to kind of look at those implications. A temporary rock armor solution would seem more viable, given the fact that if we're going to look at options, if we've already built a super groin, it kind of precludes the options available to us going forward. So I'm wary about including it as an option, because ultimately it then pretty much commits us to just doing the OBC, so the preferred option working draft, but potentially with an additional rock island or something else different. if that makes sense.
Can I just add to that, Chair? Then I suggest that we amend the wording, if Debbie's able to, on option A, which currently says pause the project to explore other options, and we just add to include temporary protection for e-speech, to include an investigation for temporary protection at e-speech if the timescale goes past the 6 months, or words to that effect.
Can you message me those words, Andrew?
Will
Would that
do.
be okay?
Yeah.
And Chair, I'll just need a bit of time to put that in. I think John Golding wants.
Yeah, John Golding wants to come in. Yes, John.
Thank you, Chair. It's great that we've got this opportunity to look at other options now, and other options that we've discarded previously as unaffordable, because this will hopefully allow us to produce the best option for Sidmouth, the best sustainable option going forward. Perhaps could I ask Tom that we focused on the economic case? Can you just remind me what the environmental and technical case was for offshore islands? And I suppose I'm looking for some reassurance that we don't explore this route only to fail later because for some reason environmentally or technically they're proven unacceptable.
Good point.
Yes. Again, with the speed that this has changed this Monday, I've not had full chance to go through all of the concerns in the BMP. But I am aware that obviously introducing new rock structures off sea, out at sea, has massive implications for the MMO, for example. There's navigational issues which may affect fishermen, lifeboat. There's also further sort of safety issues. There's enough issues we have with existing rock islands, with people swimming out to them, jumping off them, falling off them, and getting stuck in the riptides. So there are concerns about it. At the moment, we don't know if they're showstoppers because it's my understanding that we haven't spent the time and money investigating an option that wasn't previously affordable. Again, at East Beach, exactly. Again, being a World Heritage Site, the super groin is essentially a compromise solution, which the designated bodies involved accept, but would rather not have. They would rather not have anything touching the World Heritage Site or sitting within its boundary. However, for a part, the super groin does. So they've accepted that, and I think that's a compromise for them going forward. However, they see the potential for example, an offshore rock island in place. It means there would not be rock up against the cliff face, and also you could stand on the end of Sidmouth looking out to sea. You look left, and there would be an uninterrupted view along the cliffs, aside from a couple of rock islands out at sea. So they can see the benefits to doing that. Obviously, the negatives are we just at the moment we don't quite know. We don't know if the scheme will if building an offshore rock building a rock revetment and charging the beach will still be compatible with any other option going forward. I mean, I think it could be, and I actually think what we're going to end up with if we do go down a route of exploring the options is a hybrid option that will probably carry over a lot of the outline business case, but maybe have the amendment of say an offshore structure to basically keep diffuse waves and keep more beach in place for longer.
Could I just add to that? Hello?
Yes, Tony.
The offshore option, just for background for you, is that when it went through the appraisal stages, Natural England and World Heritage were totally in support of it. They thought it was the best option by far. I've lost.
From mute.
Yeah. Hello?
Are you after a response from me, Tony?
No. I was just making a statement. Like I'm losing my sound, unfortunately. No, I was just making a statement that to add to what you said is that the offshore breakwater options, Natural England and World Heritage thought it was the best option by far. They were totally in support of it.
Yeah.
Jeff, your sound's not coming through.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Is that better now?
Yeah.
Yes, we got you now.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff.
It's my switch.
So I'll just repeat.
Tony, you've gone on mute. That's it.
Recap again. Just unless it didn't get through, the original offshore breakwater options, Natural England and World Heritage were totally in support of it.
Yeah, we've got that. And over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say, I understand where Andrew and Tom are coming through with the not being able to do quickly the revetment, emergency revetment, whatever you want to call it, temporary revetment. I just wonder, I think there has already been plans by Crag to put this in, or we're going to put it in some time ago. And I just wonder, even though, and I know as government, I've learned over long, you have to follow certain procedures and timings and the way things have to be done. But perhaps we could try and put in the planning now for that, so that if we agree in the future that we could do that, it's ready to go straight away, rather than then in 6 months when we decide to do something, that then we get to the point of putting in planning, which is another 6 months away. So, you know, I think that again, just by doing things slightly out of our normal way of doing things, but if we could put in the planning, trying to be a little bit more private sector, put in the planning first so that we can actually action these things a little bit quicker than would be normally done.
Thank you, Ian. You've just brought up the previous application, which I think was 20 years ago. We have got copies of that, so it might be of some use. I don't know if Tom can answer that one.
Yes, all planning history is useful, and yes, that is a very good solution. We could prepare it all and have it ready to go, whether or not we go through the planning process. But maybe a condition is that it's dependent on when the end solution is near, in terms of, yes, is it going to be a 4-year wait from today before we put a spade in the ground, or is it just a 2-year? And if it's just a 2-year, we don't carry on with that planning. We concentrate the money and time implementing the preferred option. That does sound a very sensible way forward, and it's something worth investigating. I'll have to speak to the planning colleagues and the other consultees that we're likely to need on board, and see if that's a way to go forward. But yes, that could definitely, I can't see why we can't at least get it ready, maybe put it in the meantime, and see where that gets us.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And I've got Paul Crew.
Yeah, just to let you know that we put in the planning application in 2011 for a rock revetment. We still have, and I presume it's also within the planning archives, a design and most of the associated documentation, and I believe it was a somewhat cheaper scheme than the council scheme of 2003. So that information is still available as well.
That's very useful, Paul. And Chris Lock here.
Whatever we end up doing, we're going to require rock. So I don't really see why we can't apply for that planning permission now and put the rock there this autumn, you know, and it can sit there until such time as we decide to use it somewhere else.
Thank you, Chris. I've asked about that, and I think 6 months. We're looking at this window, getting it in before next winter, and that doesn't look possible. I wouldn't like to make a promise that we can't keep. Now, if it's going to come in by ship, I don't think they would be wanting to come in during the winter. That's going to be one of the issues with it. But yeah, I agree. No, we need the, whatever we do, we need the rock.
Yeah, if we got it in for the following winter, it would be a miracle. And I think everyone would be very, very happy that we're
exactly. Yeah, exactly, Ian. Thank you. Right. So, are we clear on what the questions are now?
If it makes it simple, Chairman, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
If it makes it simpler, I'll withdraw my suggestion, if it makes it simpler. And especially in view of the change to one, which is putting in a temporary works on East Beach at the same time.
Yeah, I'm worried that if we put a groin in, we've got to also recharge the beach to give.
Yeah, no,
I'm
happy to.
I agree with you, Tony. Withdraw that.
Yeah, that clarification of the first name. Yeah, and Tom's concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll withdraw it.
Okay, so
Chair, can I just, so you were just about to ask about the wording for the poll, and I just want to ask the group about that. So what I've just been messaging Debbie was that one of the options changed to, we pause the project to explore other options, which will include investigating and delivering as appropriate temporary protection for East Beach. Should the pause delay delivering protection at East Beach past the current 2-year timescale envisaged? But the discussion you've just had is about getting planning in now and getting temporary revetment on East Beach by next winter. And I just want to be clear about how you would like us to amend that wording, Chair, to pick that up, bearing in mind what you just said about not promising something we can't deliver.
I'm quite happy with your first proposal. I think it's to promise to go forward with a rock revetment immediately is possibly too much to ask, and I don't think we'll be able to hit the September deadline that we would need for shipping it in. So I think your earlier proposal is better.
Okay, Chair. Well, if you're happy, then would you like me to? Should we start the poll again, but with that revised wording as the first option?
I think we should, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, so members of the advisory group, you'll soon see a poll pop up on your screen. I would ask, please, that only members of the advisory group actually click on the options and submit. I know that we have a few additional councillors in who are not on the advisory group, so if you could just ignore it until that screen disappears. So I'll run the poll now. For the benefit of those who are watching online, you won't see the poll, I'm afraid. It's just for, it's only displayed for members within the Zoom meeting, but I will announce what the result of that poll is. So the poll that you're being presented with now, if you could please choose your options between pausing the project, which I won't read out in full, continue with option A as your third option, or if you wish to abstain, that's your last option, and then tap on submit. And then once I'm happy that I've got some answers, it's still taking place at the moment, Chair.
This wonderful technology.
Oh, well, I'm looking for a magic number to reach, and we're not quite there. So as I say, that's all the members of the advisory group, please, leaving aside East Devon officers that are immediately in touch, but that I would include the planning officer with that, can vote. I'll just give it a few more moments, Chair. Okay, so it looks as though I've got no more votes coming in, so I'll now end the poll and I'll share the results with you all on screen now. So for the benefit of those watching online, we have a 75% in agreement with the first option of pausing the project to explore other options, which will include investigating and delivering as appropriate temporary protection for East Beach. Should the pause delay delivering protection at East Beach past the current 2-year timescale envisaged? We have 19% who have chosen to continue with option A, the revised preferred option proposal. and we have 6% who've abstained. So in numbers terms, that's 12 for the first option, that's 3 for the second option, and 1 that's abstained. So I'll stop sharing the results, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for going for this delay. Now, personally, I would have been happy to go either way, but I know we need to go with the consensus, and that's great.
Sorry, Chair, can I quickly interrupt? I'm sorry, I do have to leave and go back to work, but I just want to say thank you very much to everyone for their time.
Yeah.
Bye-bye, sorry.
Thank you, Denise. Get back to school.
And Chairman?
Yep.
Chairman?
Yep.
Chairman, I'd just like to propose a vote of thanks to Tom for all the very hard work he's done and for unearthing this extra funding, etc., etc.
Be very happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, and yeah, thank you very much. I know Tom has done fantastic work on this, and now it's great that we've got so far. So items 11 to 14. Oh, I'm on my last page now. Tom to present. If anyone wishes to comment on this item, can you please raise your electronic blue hand? So what are we discussing? Item 1 to 12.
Item 11 next, Chair. So over to Tom for what happens next.
Right. What happens next?
There's a few blue hands raised before we move on.
Okay. Richard Ely?
No, just going to second Tony's comment. So my matters are dealt with. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. And John Loudon.
I was just going to make comments on the draft document for outlining project board roles and responsibilities, which is, I think, where you're going next, Chair.
Thank you. So over to you, Tom.
So I'd love to, but I've lost my mouse. So there we go. Oh, I can't share my screen. Right, there we go.
It's all this excitement.
Okay, so that poll has indicated that the advisory group's recommendation is not to proceed with option A at this time. It's to pause. Obviously, the cabinet will make this decision. So, if that decision to carry on with option A and not pause, this is what we're looking at in terms of construction within 2 years, and we'd be able to get the outline business case for approval very shortly. I'll try and skip to the next one. So the recommendation is that we pause and review. So that means I need to write a paper very quickly to get to cabinet in time to not add further delays. And if approved, we need to line up our consultant to basically do some outline modelling and some environmental and regulatory checks to make sure any proposals will pass. So what I'm keen to do is make sure that we have a subgroup set up, which will be a technical working group to help scope this. So my concern is that we'll spend some money and time doing this model, and the results may not come back as hoped. As in, we might still need a splash wall. The rock island may be modelled to be ineffective, and we don't have time to go back and argue. This was done, that wasn't done. So rather than us go away and work away in a silo and then present an answer, I'm keen that we have a working group set up to help scope it out and help work with the consultants and know what everyone's doing moving forward, so that when we actually get to the result, it won't be a surprise. And actually, it's a result we can believe in and not contest unless there is good reason to. Obviously, after 6 months, we'll report back to the advisory group on what the modelling suggested, what's effective, what's still affordable. And then depending on what the advisory groups say, that recommendation will go to cabinet, which will either be to resume the preferred option working draft, or investigate and instigate the new option, which could set us on the further delay as outlined. I've noticed Ian's raised his hand.
Ian, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just very quickly, Chair. I just wanted Tom to say what size working group would he prefer? Because obviously, I'm sure there'll be an awful lot of people that will want to go on this. But my experience of these sort of things is, you know, if they're too big, nothing gets done. And I just wanted to, again, Chris Lockyer, I haven't even asked him, but wanted to make sure that I put his name forward for the town council and possibly other groups that would believe in him. He doesn't have the baggage perhaps associated with, you know, people that have been on this for a very long time, and can perhaps, and he is an engineer as well. So I just wondered what size group you were looking for.
Much as you said, a smaller one as possible, but you know, I'd say 4 or 5 people. Yeah.
And I've got Martin Davis with his hand up. If you'd like to come in, Martin.
Yeah, and it's just to reiterate my earlier point really about checking on the money. I'm totally supportive of the approach, but I think it's useful to have a likely ceiling of approval for the money. Obviously, that's important because that dictates design, i.e. number and type of rock grind structures to be investigated. So I think it does need to work backwards from your likely upper limit on money, because it dictates everything else. So before we get too carried away with things, just reiterate the assurance needed to be confident, or more confident than we currently are, about that approval amount.
You seem skeptical on the amount of money, Martin.
No, it's just healthy caution, because it is a significant jump in the previous, you know, robust business case that was there before. And we're into new territory really, because the new funding guidance is relatively new, and by its nature, therefore, it's being tested, and therefore this is a good test case, if you like, for suddenly a scheme eligibility jumping up, and therefore we just need to be sure that we have confidence in that, I suppose. So it's just a optimistic caution, I suppose.
Thank you,
or
Martin.
Cautious optimism, I think the phrase is.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, Tom, do you, I presume everyone's read the paper, and you've on page 48 you've got a list of requirements of the people that want to be on this group.
Oh, sorry, I got muddled up. Sorry. What happens next? Sorry, my presentation might be out of order. There's project board roles and responsibilities. Sorry, sorry, I've got too many screens open. No, that's item 13, so we're not there yet.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so yes.
Yeah.
So yes, this would just be a subgroup to help scope what options could be tested, and again, as Martin mentioned, to make sure that we're within a sensible financial envelope that has been checked, and not putting us in a silly position where we don't have a scheme that's funded. So I would welcome 4, 5, maybe 6 people to sit on this group, but it needs to be quite small to make sure you know, we can meet frequently, quickly, and agree on what options we can take forward. Because clearly, we can't model every option in the world. There has to be a limit, because otherwise we'll be here longer than 6 months and spend millions of pounds modeling it. So based on some sensible study, you know, desk study we can probably knock some options down to a few and then select a few to be modelled. But I'm clear we need a subgroup to help steer this through, obviously reporting back to the advisory group. So yeah, I would welcome anyone who's keen to join this to make themselves known. And obviously this is pending cabinet approval, so we won't make the subgroup work unless it's approved by cabinet.
Yeah, I've got Andrew Hancock has put his hand up, and I've so if Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If Tom's finished on his item, perhaps he can take his presentation down so we can see all the participants. I was just going to say, for the working group, I think it's really important that we have a representative from Sidmouth Town Council. And as Ian's outlined, Chris would be excellent because of his engineering background. I think it's really important that we have Tony Birch there because of his historical knowledge of the scheme and his level of detail and understanding. I think we must have someone from the Chamber of Commerce because it has an impact for all of the commercial activities in Sidmouth. And perhaps I would suggest a representative from one or two of the other groups to be discussed in the advisory group.
Right, Richard Ely next.
Andrew, I don't know whether you really meant that, because that would mean me from the Chamber of Commerce. So are you sure?
Absolutely, Richard. I think it's really important. I think it's really important that you're involved, as Tom said, in the scoping exercise, because we want you to see what's happening so you can be confident in it, or you can express your dissatisfaction otherwise during that working group process. I think that's really useful.
There's always the mute button. John Loudon.
I think it's also important, if either Paul or John were willing to get involved, that someone from Cliff Road was there, because this is a significant issue and a significant part related to where they are.
Yes, I would agree with someone on Cliff Road. If someone could come forward for that.
Maybe they might want to take this outside and have a fisticuffs, and then the loser then contacts you.
So we've got now. Has Chris agreed yet?
Yes, I'm happy to do that, Jeff. Yeah.
Thank you. So we've got the town council. We've got Richard Ely. We've got who else were we wanting? Andrew, I can't remember now.
Tony.
Tony, and someone from Cliff Road. Paul Krug, could you come on this? He's smiling.
Yes, we'll have to fight it out, as just suggested, but one of us will be there.
Okay, toss a coin. Okay. So
and I'm happy to take part, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. So that's sorted. So we're back on to, is it item 12 next?
Yep, item 12 next. Tom, are you ready to go with that?
I was just on mute, so I just said something and no one. Sorry, apologies. Yeah, just showing screen now. Is it coming? Come on, there we go. Right. So I'm sure you're well aware of the recent storm events that hit both Seaton and Sidmouth. Obviously, I know this is Sidmouth BMP, but it's important to note the event that happened at Seaton, partially because Seaton does have a high splash wall, and arguably, and it's been said, I think, within the steering group, that that wall's never been tested, it's never been overtopped, it is not needed. The events at the end of January proved otherwise. So it's just to raise concern that yes, it was a unique set of events, but that the splash wall was overtopped. This is a still of the image of coming over the splash wall. So that you can't really see, but the floodgate is actually shut. So it's water coming over both sets of splash walls, and it caused car damage and also damage to the road. If this is thought to be a result of a build-up of the waves pushing the beach to form a ramp. So rather than there being a solid vertical or curved structure to reflect the waves just went straight up and over. I'm hoping, yes. So this is a picture of the aftermath, and then this is a close-up picture of green water overtopping, so slot coming over the top. If I'm clever enough, I've got a video. Oh, it's come over here. Right. So I'm gonna have to drag the video over.
Just to add that all the muck on the road is the remains of the flower beds.
So I'll turn the sound off. So this is a video that was sent in. This is the green water overtopping that we are concerned about.
Yeah.
Just to prove it does happen, and it's happened very locally. This was also not a big event in terms of flood warning. I think there was a flood alert out, but not a flood warning, which means the Environment Agency were worried about sort of people on promenades, but not about flooding. So it wasn't that big an event. Moving over to Sidmouth.
Tom, how high did the beach come to the splash wall?
In places, up to it. It was a complete ramp.
Right to the top of the splash wall?
Yes, yeah.
Really? Crikey.
Yep. There are photos, and I haven't got them here, showing benches on the beach being dug out, on the promenade being dug out because they were buried. So,
yeah.
These are pictures kindly from the Vision Group's video they put together on their website, again showing some of the storms at Sidmouth. I'm pretty happy there wasn't green water overtopping, but what concerns me was the amount of spray overtopping and the volumes that was generating. You can see on the right-hand image that there was a lot of water on the road, and being a video, if you watched it, you'll see it cascading away. Again, this wasn't a big event. It didn't warrant a flood warning from the Environment Agency. So it does show that there is flood risk here. We're not making this up. Sidmouth, in my mind, has been quite lucky, but it hasn't had a similar event as Seaton did and recently, and actually hasn't experienced green water overtopping yet. And obviously, this is more the aftermath of the storm. You can see a fair bit of water's gone over, and obviously plenty of shingle on the esplanade. Again, welcome to have any comments back, but this is just more to alert the fact that, we're not, we do have a genuine concern about flooding of Sidmouth. We just, we haven't witnessed an event which has flooded Sidmouth in recent memory. So this is what we're all working to, as well as the work at East Beach to reduce the rate of erosion. We are working to reduce the risk to Sidmouth. That's the end of my slide on this one.
Tom, just to say, I've got some photographs I've just been sent through from a council in Seaton with photographs of the angle of the beach and the benches. We possibly could send that through to members later on.
Yeah,
that'd be good.
Shall I move on? Any hands up?
Was there any questions from that? Yeah, no questions. So let's move on to Lucky 13.
Yeah, and apologise for the spelling mistake. So I'll move on very quickly. I think I spelt it right there. Good. So So yes, this is an important section, and I appreciate it's late in the meeting, and it's probably not of interest to some people. But we've been trying to get the project board roles and responsibilities sorted to help with the project governance. I mean, ultimately, Cabinet makes decisions for the project based on East Devon, and the advisory group advises. But somewhere in between, there needs to be some quick decisions made, and it's how they're made. Currently, a lot of them sit with myself as project manager, which doesn't always sit right. So a project board, which we had before in the early days, is proposed to basically be able to help with decision making going forward, which may not need to go to Cabinet. So, you know, the paper outlines all a bit in much more detail, but their aim is to manage project risk. I'll go to the next slide. So my proposal, or our proposals, is the project board is kept relatively small, and so our aim is to have it as outlined. We're keen to have people that are contributing money into the scheme involved, but appreciating that we can't have a representative from every body on, because otherwise it's an extended steering group. So we made the suggestion that we get a single representative from the sort of smaller contributors into the project board, which I guess we can discuss at a later date. Obviously, most of the details in the paper, and it's very dry to go through on a slideshow. So, it's obviously our intention to reform the project board and move forward with that. So, if anyone has any questions on that or any suggestions, I'd like to hear it, please.
Councillor John Loudon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, looking at the paper, if you look at section 1, project hierarchy and where the project board sits, it seems to me that we ought to at least insert there this advisory group, because it is part of the structure. And I think that is missing from that document. Do you want me to, Jeff, just raise the other issues I wanted to, and then
yes, please.
Someone can come back to me. The next one is a question at 2.7, talking about the project board making decisions that involve no more than a 6-month project delay or an increase of cost beyond £250,000. I suppose my question is, one, it seems a long period of time, 6 months delay. 2, £250,000 seems quite a lot of money. So, you know, is that standard? Is it appropriate? I presume the answer will be yes and yes, because it's in there, but I just thought I would ask the question. And then in 3.4, it's got project manager, EDDC officer, and I just wanted some clarity about what role in EDDC that is likely to be, what level, etc. I presume a reasonably senior level. That was it, Chair. Thank you.
Can I just ask, I haven't got those references in the papers I've got.
Page 47, 48, I believe.
Yeah, 47. 2.7 is make decisions in accordance with the relevant scheme of delegation. There's no money in it.
Page 47. What number was it, John?
2.7, Chair. Am I going by a different draft?
That is a possibility. There was an earlier draft, but I'm not entirely sure it got sent out. And again, I think that answers your question, that regarding the financial and time cutoff, we just felt it's better to have it a bit more flexible, because having a set limit, again, and also regarding time to actually try and develop this, is checking that we're allowed to have those set limits. So actually having it a bit more open for interpretation is probably more wise. hence why it's not on 2.7 on the latest version.
All right, then forget what I said. Sorry to waste people's time.
That's no problem, John.
To answer John's other question, the project manager level at East Devon will be Tom. Tom is our engineering projects manager.
John Golding, do you want to come in on this because you're going to be involved?
Only to say, Chair, and it does say on the top of the paper that subject to the views of what the advisory group say, this is something we'll have to take to Cabinet for approval, and those delegations that Councillor Loudon just spoke about will be looked at again there if the advisory group agree this approach, which I believe is based mainly on the Environment Agency arrangements with some tweaks to adjust for a local authority setting.
Thank you, John. I've got Ian Barlow, and then I've got Martin Davis from the Environment Agency, who hopefully will be able to confirm that. So first of all, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to suggest that you're looking for one member from the different groups rather than John's perhaps thing of getting more people involved. And I would just suggest that the new group we've just agreed, which has got all those members on, just agrees amongst themselves who will be the best person to sit on that board. And I would be happy that they agree that person and that person then would talk back to those various groups and keep them all in the loop and happy.
Thank you, Ian. And Martin Davis.
Yeah, as a point of terminology, I think I read in there that the Environment Agency is down as primary partner. I think it's a term that partner for the Environment Agency would normally mean some sort of lead approach or joint approach on the project and or financial contribution. So even though the Environment Agency assures money, it doesn't necessarily mean the agency is a formal partner in the project. So it's just a terminology thing that we just have to clarify, I suppose, for ourselves.
Yeah, Martin, it was different, but following a lengthy meeting, the terms were adjusted to suit local authority rather than the Environment Agency's project board names. But probably a conversation to have outside of this, but we can adjust the names to suit better what each organisation would prefer. But
happy with that.
Yeah.
So, is there a decision to make on this to take to Cabinet? Do we vote on it?
Chair, if you so wish, I can run a quick poll again. That will just be a for, against, and abstain. If members of the advisory board just want to say that they're happy with what's presented to them there, goes forward to Cabinet.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that.
Okay.
If I could just respond to Ian Barlow's comment about the advisory group being on the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's sensible to put it on the hierarchy, but of course it's not represented on the project board. Apart from the fact that the chairman will probably be involved.
Well, I think it's recommendations from the advisory group will go to the project board.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that they have a voice of it, but it's not a decision.
No, exactly, because the hierarchy was the decision-making hierarchy.
Yeah.
In accordance with the scheme of delegation of the council, that's what that hierarchy was, and the advisory group doesn't make decisions. Just for clarity.
So we're happy to go ahead with the questionnaire if Debbie's ready.
Okay, so members of the advisory group then, if you're happy that you're with what you have before you in the agenda goes forward in a Cabinet report to get that project board set up. If you can choose either for or against or abstain. And for the benefit of those watching online, that vote is now taking place. I'm just waiting for a magic number to appear. Looks like we've lost one or two advisory board members.
Yeah, apologies for the time.
Okay, Chair, I think we've got all that we're having, so I'll just end that poll. And you can see from the results, we have 12 for, 1 against, and 2 abstentions of who we've got left on the group at the present time, Chair. So that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I haven't got item 14 written down here, but item 15 I've got A and OB. So is there an item 14?
That was just for any additional questions which haven't been picked up so far.
Right. So have we got any additional questions?
So, Chair, is this the point where you want to clarify the issue that was raised at the beginning in terms of the minutes on what the aim of the group is?
Yes, that'd be fine. Chris or Tony on this one then?
I think we've got to go away and talk it through by ourselves. I think it's something we need to, there's a technical issue associated with it, which Chris raised, which I think needs to be talked about through with Tom. It would have been okay in the old days, what was written, seek to achieve a 200-year standard of service, but that Chris is concerned that may commit us trying to achieve things earlier rather than later. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but which we need to bottom out. So perhaps you can explain it, Chris.
Yeah.
I think it's because it talks about taking into account climate change. Means that the sea level will be higher in 100 years' time than it is now. And if you're trying to design for 100 years' time, that is actually committing you to things that you don't necessarily want today.
Yeah.
So if we set up another quick meeting with the subgroup to finish this off, and also take into account some of the wording issues that Mary was discussing earlier.
And I think it's important because, as you see from the last paper, the project board is trying to deliver these aims. So we really do have to get them right.
Yeah. Yeah. So we delay the decision until the next meeting.
Okay, Chair. Yep, we'll bring that forward to the next meeting after the work's gone on behind the scenes to get that clarified. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So item 15, any other business? Can I have tickets for the air show?
Date of next meeting, Chair.
So, Chair, I've set up a provisional date for the next meeting at the moment, but I realise that may change depending on what happens next and reports to Cabinet. But at the moment, I've got a provisional date for your diaries of 9:30 AM on the 4th of May of this year.
And obviously that would be another Zoom meeting.
Yes, Chair, it would be.
And good, getting quite used to them. So any other business? Any hands up? Everyone had enough? This brings our meeting to an end, and I would like to thank everyone, including any members of the public watching online, for taking part. However, I just remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live, and until then, your comments will be live to the public. And thank you, everyone.